I was 12 years old and all but given up by the system. I went through life afraid. I was bullied so badly that my classmates inflicted a head injury on me twice. And my parents were understandably concerned and pulled me out of school, and I was turned inside out by psychologists. And they found out a couple of things. Where my social and my physical abilities were way below normal. I wasn't able to decently kick against the ball. My handwriting was terrible, and making friends was a big chore for me. At the same time, when I was 15, I got a summer job working for an IT company as a senior programmer. And doing this, on Saturdays I was doing complex data analysis, and throughout the week I was failing math. And this kind of created a question in me. How can that be? How is that possible? And so in life I'd been dealt this stack of cards, a completely incoherent set of abilities. And somehow I've been able to turn that around. I've founded several companies. I've set up a school system. So somehow I've been able to turn that personal trauma, to turn these obstacles into my purpose, into meaning, and finding a way into life. And one question that keeps me going every single time is the question, why do some people find their way and some people get lost along the way? And I think this is a question I think about a lot, and this is not just an intellectual exercise. I've had the horrible experience of having to say goodbye to two friends of mine who ended their own lives. They were extremely talented in some ways, but handicapped in others. Handicapped in such a way that they really didn't know how to find their place in life. What makes the difference between those who find their way and those who get lost along the way? At the other side of the coin, I've got a guy that's working for me. Dick, he's a brilliant guy. He had several low education jobs. He was about to become a bus driver. And then he came working for us and he found his way, and now he's a senior trainer for us. He's being regarded as a walking encyclopedia. What makes the difference between those who find their way and those who get lost along the way? And the reason I most desperately want to find an answer are my two little girls, my two little princesses. The eldest, go figure with a dad like me, has a complex profile. Everybody regards her as being extremely bright, but she's been tested as the bottom 3% on standardized tests. If you want to put a label on it, you almost call it mental disability. And I want nothing more than to find, to build, to create a system in which her talents can shine and she can find a meaningful, joyful life, whatever that is for her. And not just for her, but for all the little princes and little princesses like her. What's the difference between those who find their way and those who get lost along the way? And the answer is your attitude towards life. How you look at life, how you deal with life, and with what happens with you. And when I found this answer, I turned my entire life upside down and spent my entire life trying to transform the education system, setting up schools, finding places to teach this to our children. But I'm getting ahead of myself. But let's first look at what I mean with an attitude towards life. And let's look at a concrete example. If you want to know the best predictor for a 4-year-old, whether they'll be able to finish university or not, there's a very simple test to determine that. And that test is called the marshmallow test. Some of you might have heard of it. It's a test. It's the most sadistic psychological test of all times. You take a 4-year-old, you put him on a chair, you give him one marshmallow and you say, if you leave it for 15 minutes, you'll get 2. And the fact whether they are able to leave that marshmallow for 15 minutes is a better predictor for whether they'll finish university in the end, better predictor than intelligence, better predictor than background, than anything else. And this is the type of research that's been expanded upon in a really cool new field that's called positive psychology. Positive psychology, as opposed to kind of classic psychology, isn't so much aimed at finding out why and how people are broken, and how to fix it, but looking at how can people function even better? How can we add to their well-being? And one of the core principles in it is called learned optimism. Learned optimism. If you look in our school, you could have 2 students, and I give them a really tough assignment. And they're both equally talented. And then one student might go out, sit there, look at the assignment, and get completely stuck. And don't know what to do, blames himself, doesn't know how to deal with it, and just really grumpy. And the other students start working with the assignment and gets happy. He doesn't know how to do it, but he just finds a way. And he's happy doing it, happy working on it. And the difference between the two is that the one who gets into a negative funk is a learned pessimist. And the one who finds a way to give it meaning and to give it learning value is a learned optimist. But what blew my mind, because when I learned about this, I immediately recognized, and maybe you do too, but what blew my mind is that word learned. It's a learned optimist or a learned pessimist. You can learn these attitudes. So when I learned that, I started going out to schools and saying, we should implement this. And when in classrooms we were teaching these things to kids and teaching them tools to work with it, you saw a huge difference. They're better able to deal with challenges. They had more fun dealing with challenges and doing all kinds of stuff. They got happier doing it. So the question is, what are the things that we can do to help students develop this, to help our children develop this? And to illustrate that, I want to share 2 stories with you. And the stories start back in high school, where I got Latin and Latin culture and Latin philosophers. And we got to translate the Stoic philosopher Seneca. And Seneca was wrestling with the question, why do many evil things befall good men? It's a good question. I ponder it a lot. Why do bad things happen to good people? And before I give you Seneca's answer, I'm going to give you a story to illustrate it. And the story starts with a botanist who has made his life mission to create the perfect acorn. He nurtures it, he works it, and at the end of his life, he succeeds. He has created the 2 perfect acorns. But being too old to plant them himself, he goes out and finds 2 candidates, a young king and a hermit. And he gives them the acorns, and the king is exalted. He's so happy. He says, this will be part of my legacy. I will have a special palace built for my acorn. I'll have a special garden built for this acorn to shield it from the elements. The hermit takes a different path. The hermit thinks for a long time, and he goes out on a travel. Through the city, through the desert, across the river to the farthest and most remote cliff he can find. And on that cliff, in a little bit of further soil, he plants in the salty sea air that little acorn. And he makes his travels back. And 40 years later, the king has finally reached the moment where he'll retire, and he goes to this special palace. And with great ceremony, they open the special garden, and the king is waiting. This will be the moment. I will see the perfect oak. And he walks into the garden, and what he sees is the most mediocre oak he's ever seen. And he sinks to his knees and he weeps. Is this my legacy? And the hermit makes the travels again. At the end of his life, he travels through the city, through the desert, across the river, to the farthest and most remote cliff he can find. And there, greeting him from afar, is the tallest, strongest, mightiest oak there ever was. And thus answers Seneca back in my classroom. Is it that life presents good men with challenges and hardships? Like a wrestler whose focus is on developing strength. He picks the strongest opponents he can find and tells them to give him everything. He submits to their blows and their hurts. And if he can't find a match in one single opponent, he picks 2, because that is how you grow into your potential. And I see the same happening in our schools. I see these little princes and princesses, these acorns, with the potential in them to become that mighty oak, but they don't become it. But when I see the people who have dealt with obstacles, dealt with challenges, they come out stronger, they come out more capable of dealing with life than the others. So that is what we do in our school. We actually purposefully challenge children. We create obstacles for them and then give them the tools to deal with them. And you see a huge difference in how they experience life that way. So the next question would be, what kind of tools are they? I'm going to share one of them with you, and it's actually a question. And of course, we need another story to explain that question. And this particular story starts with a mother and her 3 sons in the old India. This mother and her 3 sons wants to create a famous Indian dish. And to be able to do that, she needs a big vase of oil. And what mothers want to do is pick one of their sons and send them off. So the oldest son gets the chore, he goes with his vase, he goes to the marketplace, he buys oil and he comes back. But coming back, he trips and he loses most of his oil. And he comes back to his mother and says, "Mama, it's awful. This is the worst day ever. I fell and I lost almost all of my oil." Well, says his mother, "It's not that bad. I mean, come on, relax." But she has a problem because now she doesn't have enough oil. So time for son number 2. Son number 2 goes out. He goes buying oil. He comes back, but he also trips. And he comes back to his mother and says, "Mom, this is the best day ever. I fell, I'm in one piece, the vase is in one piece, and I saved some oil too." Well, his mother is not quite as enthusiastic, but still not enough oil, so time for son number 3. He goes on his way, he buys oil, he trips as well. And he comes home to his mother and says, "I fell, I lost some of the oil, I still have some of the oil. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to the marketplace. I'll work for this merchant for 2 hours, and then I'll make enough money to buy a new vase of oil." And so he did. And in these 3 sons, we can see 3 ways of looking at the world. You have the first son who is a pessimist. Whatever happens, it's awful. And the second who is an optimist. It's all amazing. But they're both not very helpful. The third is more interesting. The third son is optimistic about the fact that he can do something to make it better. He can do something to improve it. And from that comes a question. What can you do to make things better? And this is the most important question that any teacher should have. What can you do to make things better? Because there are 3 things in there. What can you? The ownership should always stay with the child. You cannot learn for a child. You can only create an environment in which the child can learn. What can you do? Do, not talk about, not whine about, but do to make things better. And to make them better, not perfect, not happily ever after, but better than they are now. And if I can say what I'm most grateful for in life, grateful for my parents, grateful for my wife, grateful for the gifted counselor I had in high school, is that they didn't solve my problems for me. They taught me independence, they taught me self-reliance by letting me solve my own problems, by asking me, what are you going to do to make things better, and then supporting that. And that really was a turning point, because that became a guiding question, and that guided me to taking control, to taking ownership. And that was a completely different story. My life was completely different. And from there on, I've gone on to set up several companies. I've set up several schools, and they're all answers to that same question. What can you do to make things better? And somehow people seem to think that after a while it becomes easier. But the bigger problems you tackle, the bigger obstacles you'll get. And it isn't smooth sailing. I mean, I've had major obstacles. I was inches away from bankruptcy at one point. I put my faith in people and they abandoned me. I'm fighting for some students who are misfits in the system, and it's against overwhelmingly bad odds. And sometimes it really creates despair, not knowing what to do. And still, I despair once in a while. But what gets me through is that question. What can I do to make things better? And like that boy in India, I am optimistic that there's always something you can do to make things better. And like that wrestler that Seneca talked about, I believe that the stronger my obstacles, the more I will grow. And like that acorn growing on that cliff, I know that this will cause me to become all I can be. And in any intervention we work with in schools, I always ask myself the question, is what we are doing strengthening kids, or is it weakening them? Is it making them stronger, or is it making them weaker? And unfortunately, I see a lot of the latter. A lot of kids, we're trying to help them by taking obstacles away. Kids have challenges or even so-called disabilities, and we take their problems away. And we do that with good intentions. And it's good that we put time, money, and energy into it, but we're going about it the wrong way, because that way we're becoming a nation of curlers. You guys know what curling is? It's that sport that you shove a disc over the ice and somebody goes in front of it with a little broom and smooths the entire path. That's us. That's us as parents, running in front of our kids, making the world as smooth as possible. Taking away the obstacles, and if we don't take the obstacles away, we pick up the kid and we drop him at the end result. But, and this is a big but, it does create better results, but you don't help the kid. The kid ends up weaker than he was before. Because I don't know about your life, but my life is full of challenges, full of all kinds of things that are working against me. And by dealing with those challenges, I get stronger, I get better. So it's important to learn that, and I hope that as an education system, we're going to make the next step. We've already made huge steps from just dumping content in the heads of kids to teaching them skills, but now we need to take the next steps as well. We need to learn them an attitude towards life. That should be the core curriculum. The most important thing should not be what do you know, but who do you become? And this is what I spend every day of my life on, finding ways to transform schools. We set up a school, we've got more than 100 students, 2 more schools coming. We're guiding 250 schools a year to put these principles into action. And so what I hope that you'll take away from this is that you will let go of your tendency to take away the obstacles and be that curler. What I hope is that you will let go of your tendency to take your most treasured acorns and put them in a shielded garden, because you're not helping them. And that you let go of the tendency to let control be with other people. And when other people drop the ball, to look at it and expect somebody else to pick it up. Pick it up yourself and ask yourself, what can I do to make this better? And if we do that, the world will be a better place. So let's go. Let's go and embrace the obstacles and learn from them. Let's go and transform our schools one by one to teach this to our children. Let's go and be role models in this. And face our challenges with our heads held high, knowing we'll grow from that. And if we do that, all our little princes and princesses will be helped. All of them, yours and mine, will be better prepared for that unknowable future we've been talking about the entire day. And that, to me, seems like a flight worth taking. Let's go. I'll go first. Thank you.